"Excuse me, sir, you can't stand there." The voice cut through the soft music of the school auditorium. The janitor froze, still catching his breath, still wearing his work gloves. He had run straight from the evening shift, mop bucket abandoned, badge still clipped to his chest, just to make it before the curtain rose. His daughter had begged him all week, "Please, Dad, just this one time. Be there when I look out." He was there. Almost. Parents filled the seats in polished rows, murmuring politely. In the front, the CEO of the company that sponsored the school's new auditorium sat among the board donors, tailored suit, composed expression, phone silenced but always close. At the back, the janitor leaned against the wall, still breathing heavy, still smiling toward the stage. He could see her third from the left, paper crown slightly crooked, eyes scanning the crowd for him. Then came the whisper. "Is he part of the staff?" "I think he's the custodian. Look at his clothes." The usher hesitated, glancing between the donors and the man in uniform. "Sir, parents only beyond the aisle, please. Staff should wait outside until the event's over." The janitor blinked, confused. "I'm not working. But the usher's voice stayed low and polite, the kind that left no room for dignity. "Please, sir, donors are seated. We can't block the walkway." He turned toward the stage again. His daughter had spotted him. Her face lit up and then fell. She saw the usher guiding him out. He raised a hand to wave, just for her, but the door closed before she could see it. Outside, the muffled applause of the audience swelled through the hallway. He stood there staring at the closed doors, his gloves still on, his chest still rising and falling like someone who'd run too hard for something small that mattered too much. Inside, the CEO noticed the exchange, just a glimpse, and something uneasy flickered in his eyes. But he said nothing, not yet. The janitor looked down at his calloused hands, at the faint reflection of the stage lights through the glass. He whispered under his breath, "I was here, kiddo. I swear I was here." And from that quiet humiliation began a story neither of them would ever forget. The alarm went off before dawn, the same sharp tone that had started every day for the last 7 years. He didn't even need it anymore. His body knew the rhythm. Coffee first, uniform second, lunch packed third. By the time the world outside began to wake, he was already on the bus, gloves tucked into his pocket, back curved from years of quiet work. At the maintenance depot, no one said much during the early hours. A nod, a grunt, a shared thermos of cheap coffee. That was how men like him greeted the morning. He'd clock in, sign the same log, and push his cart toward the elevators before the executives arrived. That was the unspoken rule. The building had to shine before anyone important stepped inside. He took pride in that silence. Every polished surface, every cleared hallway, every fixed light, it meant someone would walk into comfort without ever wondering who made it that way. His badge didn't carry power, but it carried purpose, and for him that had to be enough. But the quiet had its own weight. Every mop stroke came with the same thought: don't be late for her. His daughter Mia, 9 years old, all curiosity and theater scripts, kept his world in color. She'd inherited her mother's stage smile, that spark that made small rooms feel like spotlights. Her mother had passed when Mia was only 2. A sudden illness, one of those cruel turns that left no time for goodbyes. He'd promised her at the hospital bedside, "I'll never miss her moments." Not one. He meant it, but meaning didn't change schedules. Sometimes the night shift stretched past dawn, forcing him to nap on benches before walking her to school. Sometimes the extra cleaning requests came on weekends. When she wanted pancakes, he gave her cereal instead and said, "Next time, kiddo." The next time rarely came. Still, he tried. Each morning, he slipped her a folded note in her lunchbox, a joke, a doodle, a line that said, "I'm proud of you." She always wrote back, "I'm proud of you too, Dad," in tiny, colorful pen. The guilt wasn't loud, it was steady, like the hum of a machine that never stopped. At work, the divide was visible in every hallway. Executives wore smiles that cost more than his monthly rent. They passed him without eye contact, their shoes clicking over the floors he'd buffed minutes earlier. The janitorial staff had their own entrance, their own break room tucked behind the loading dock. They joked about being ghosts. "If we're doing it right, no one knows we exist." He used to laugh with them. Lately, it just felt true. The CEO, the same man who'd seen him at the school play, was almost mythic around the building. A visionary, they said. A perfectionist who'd built the company from scratch. To the janitor, he was just another face behind tinted glass. Their worlds overlapped only through fingerprints on a desk or a spill cleaned before dawn. Still, he respected the man. Not for his wealth, but for the order he created. Clean spaces, efficient systems, fair pay on time. That was something in itself. Yet on nights when the building emptied and echoes replaced voices, he sometimes paused with his mop in hand and wondered if he'd traded too much for stability. He wanted his daughter to remember laughter, not fatigue. But rent, groceries, and braces didn't leave much room for dreams. That night, after being escorted out of the school play, he'd gone back to work early. He said nothing to anyone, just grabbed the mop and started again. The floor shone, but his reflection didn't look like a man at peace. He checked his phone. No messages from Mia. Usually she'd send a heart emoji or a photo from backstage. Nothing tonight. Just silence. He sat down in the empty hallway, staring at the bucket's slow swirl of water. For the first time, the building felt too big, too clean, too lonely. He whispered the same promise again, like a prayer that kept breaking. Next time I'll make it. I'll be there. But promises are heavy when made by tired hands. And by the end of that week, he'd get an offer from the one man who had unknowingly humiliated him. An offer that would test every part of that promise. "Morning, sir. You missed a spot." The voice came with a hint of teasing, not malice, but it still made the janitor pause mid-wipe. He turned slowly and saw the same man from the auditorium, the CEO, standing with a coffee cup and an uncomfortable smile. For a second, neither of them knew how to bridge the memory between them. One remembered being escorted out, the other remembered watching it happen. The janitor straightened, pulling off his gloves. "Good morning, sir," he said quietly, his tone neutral but respectful. The CEO studied him, noticing the worn hands, the careful posture. "You work nights, don't you? I recognize you." "Yes, sir. Maintenance, third floor to lobby rotation." "Right. You were at the school last week, weren't you?" The janitor hesitated, his eyes flickering for just a moment. "My daughter's play," he admitted, "didn't end how I hoped." The CEO shifted, clearly uneasy. "Yes. About that." He looked around, lowering his voice as if embarrassment was contagious. "I think there was a misunderstanding. The ushers didn't know who you were. I should have said something." The janitor shook his head. "You didn't owe me that, sir." "Still," the CEO replied, trying for sincerity, "I should have handled it differently. It wasn't right." The janitor offered a faint smile. "It's fine," she noticed, though. "That's what hurts." The CEO nodded, eyes thoughtful. For a moment there was genuine quiet, the kind that reveals who people are when they stop performing. Then the executive tone returned. "Listen, I actually came down here for a reason. We're hosting a private investor event this weekend at the downtown branch. It's important: cameras, guests, media. The cleaning team is short, and I need someone reliable. Overtime pay, double rate." The janitor blinked. "This weekend?" "Saturday evening," the CEO said, glancing at his phone. "You'd be off by midnight, maybe later. Think of it as a chance to make up for what happened. I want to make sure you're compensated properly." The janitor didn't answer right away. He thought of the play rehearsal Mia had invited him to. She'd been practicing her solo line all week, nervous but proud. Saturday night was the final run-through before opening. She'd saved him a seat. "Sir," he said carefully, "Saturday's a little tough. My daughter's—" "I understand," the CEO interrupted, polite but firm. "But this is a one-time thing. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. You'll be well paid, a full week's wages for one shift." The number stuck in his mind. A week's pay. That meant catching up on rent, maybe getting Mia those new sneakers she wanted. It meant breathing room. He hesitated, the choice tightening around him like a vise. The CEO smiled. "You've got a reputation, you know, reliable, detail-oriented. My office manager says the floors never looked better." "Thank you, sir. So, can I count on you?" There it was. The trap disguised as gratitude. The janitor looked at his hands. "Yes, sir. I'll be there." "Good," the CEO said, clapping him lightly on the shoulder before walking off. "I knew I could trust you." The hallway returned to silence. He stared at the wet floor, watching the reflection ripple in the light. That evening he broke the news to Mia. She was sitting at the kitchen table, legs swinging, costume script in front of her. "You're missing rehearsal?" she asked, voice small. "Just this one," he said, "but I'll be there for the real thing. Promise." She looked down at the paper. "You always say that." Her words hit harder than she meant them to. He wanted to explain about the bills, the overtime, the chance to get ahead. But she was too young to understand the math behind sacrifice. Instead, he forced a smile. "I'll make it up to you, kiddo. We'll get ice cream after the show. Your favorite." She nodded without looking up. That night, He stood by her bedroom door, after she'd fallen asleep, listening to her soft breathing. On her nightstand sat a drawing. Stick figures holding hands under a stage light. She'd written me and Dad in uneven letters. He touched the paper gently, feeling both proud and crushed at once. Saturday came faster than expected. The event hall gleamed. Chandeliers polished. Carpets steam cleaned, every inch inspected. He worked methodically, hands steady, expression unreadable. In the distance he could hear laughter from the guests arriving, the kind that belonged to people who never thought about the hands that made their comfort possible. At one point the CEO passed him in the hallway and gave a nod of approval. "Good work," he said. "You're a man I can depend on." The janitor forced a polite smile. "Thank you, sir." But as the night dragged on, his phone buzzed twice, missed calls from Mia. He didn't answer. When he finally checked his messages after midnight, there was just one voice note, a trembling whisper saying, "I looked for you in the audience, Daddy. I didn't see you." He sat alone in the janitor's closet, phone in hand, the pay envelope heavy in his pocket but his heart heavier still. He'd earned respect that night from the wrong people. "Daddy, are you coming this time?" The question came early Sunday morning, as the janitor packed up his tools for another shift. He looked at his daughter's face, hopeful but guarded, like she was bracing for disappointment. "Of course," he said softly. "I'll be front row, I promise." She tilted her head. "You said that for rehearsal too." He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "I know, sweetheart. That one, I couldn't help. But this one, I swear on everything. I'll be there when the curtain opens." She didn't smile right away. "You're not working again, are you?" He shook his head, forcing a grin. "Nope. I'm yours that night. Nothing's stopping me." But even as he said it, the guilt pricked behind his ribs. The envelope from the CEO still sat on the counter. Overtime pay, more than he'd seen in a month. He'd already used part of it to order her new costume and schedule her dental appointment. The rest would cover bills. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like debt, not in money but in trust. All week, he tried to make it right, woke up early to make her favorite breakfast, walked her to school despite his aching knees, practiced her lines with her after dinner, pretending to forget his own exhaustion. She'd start to smile, then remember she was mad and turn away again. At work he was quiet, deliberate, methodical. That was his shield, doing everything perfectly so no one could say he failed at something else. But on Friday night, while cleaning the main lobby for another investor meeting, he overheard the CEO laughing with a group of guests near the conference room. "People these days," the CEO said, voice casual but sharp, "don't know their place anymore. You give them a little opportunity, they think it makes them equal. Some things just stay the way they are. Hierarchy keeps order." The guests chuckled politely. The janitor froze mid-step, holding the mop handle tighter. He wasn't sure if the comment was meant for him, but he felt it like it was. A silent sting that hit harder because it was dressed in civility. He kept cleaning. That's what he always did, clean around other people's messes without making one of his own. The next day, he tried calling Mia during his lunch break. No answer. He sent her a voice note. "Hey kiddo, big day tomorrow. You'll do great. I can't wait to see you on stage. Read receipt." No reply. He swallowed the lump in his throat and went back to scrubbing baseboards. That evening, a staff meeting delayed his shift end. The floor manager, new, strict, trying too hard, ordered a full inspection before anyone left. "We can't afford mistakes with the media here," she said. The janitor glanced at the clock. The play started in 40 minutes. He worked faster. Sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't slow down. When the manager finally signed the sheet, he grabbed his jacket and bolted toward the exit, only to find the last bus already gone. By the time he reached the school, his breath heavy, his shirt damp, the hallway lights were dim. The janitor's badge still hung from his collar. He hadn't even realized. A custodian sweeping near the entrance looked up. "You missed it, man. They wrapped up 15 minutes ago." He nodded numbly, stepping aside as parents exited with flowers and smiles. Somewhere in that crowd he saw her, Mia, holding her script, scanning faces until her eyes landed on him. He smiled weakly. She didn't. When they got home, she said nothing. She changed into pajamas and went straight to bed. He stood outside her door, hand on the knob, debating if he should say something. Finally, he whispered, "You were amazing, kiddo. I'm proud of you." Her voice came muffled from the other side. "Being there means showing up, not cleaning up." He froze. Her words were small but precise, the kind that left no space for reply. He stayed there until he heard her breathing slow into sleep. That night he sat at the kitchen table staring at the pay envelope. It was supposed to mean progress, but it just looked like proof of what he'd traded. The next morning he walked into work early, trying to drown the guilt in movement. As he buffed the lobby floor, the CEO entered with a few board members, laughing, gesturing, full of energy. "Our people work hard," the CEO said, smiling toward the group. "Some more than others, but hey, everyone serves a purpose, even if it's just keeping the lights on." They all laughed lightly. The janitor kept polishing, pretending not to hear, until one of the guests asked jokingly, "Doesn't he ever rest?" The CEO chuckled. "Some people never learn their place, always trying to impress someone who isn't looking." The words landed like a slap. Public, polished, and absolute. The guests moved on, but the janitor stayed still, his hand trembling slightly on the buffer handle. He didn't look up, didn't speak, didn't break. He just let the machine hum louder until the noise covered the ache in his chest. When the lobby emptied, he turned off the buffer and looked at the gleaming floor. His reflection stared back, small, tired, invisible. He whispered, "You're supposed to be proud of what you do." But for the first time it didn't sound like truth, it sounded like survival. And in that silence, something inside him began to shift. Not anger, not rebellion, just the quiet start of a man realizing that dignity can't live where respect doesn't. He wiped his hands, picked up his gloves and walked toward the storage room, the only space in the building where he could breathe without pretending. Tomorrow, he'd still show up, but something deep down knew he wouldn't keep showing up the same way. The following week passed without sound. At home, the usual morning chatter, Mia reciting lines from her play, him reminding her about breakfast, vanished. She moved through the apartment like a shadow, eyes on the floor, answers clipped, plates cleared without being asked. He tried once or twice. "Want pancakes tomorrow?" "No thanks." "You doing okay at school?" "Fine." Every reply was short enough to end the conversation before it began. He didn't blame her. Children could forgive many things, but broken promises left a quiet scar, the kind that didn't show but lingered in tone and distance. At work, the janitor filled the silence with motion. He volunteered for extra shifts, cleaned empty wings no one checked, stayed long after the others clocked out. The supervisors appreciated it. The CEO probably never noticed. That was the strange comfort of invisible work. When you did it right, no one saw you. He told himself it was better this way. If he stayed busy, he wouldn't have to hear the stillness at home. The days blurred together. Mop, polish, repeat. The smell of disinfectant clung to his clothes no matter how many times he washed them. His back began to ache in new places, but he ignored it. Pain was just part of the rhythm now. Sometimes during breaks, he'd sit by the service elevator and listen to the hum of the building. Above him he could hear board meetings, laughter, glass doors opening and closing. Somewhere up there, the CEO was probably giving another talk about work ethic, gratitude, and leadership. He wondered if people like that ever realized how many hands their success rested on, how many tired backs made their mornings seamless. He never envied them. Not really. He just wanted to be seen, not praised, just acknowledged. That Friday, a news alert popped up on his phone. Local CEO receives Humanitarian Leadership Award. There was a photo. The same man smiling before a crowd, hand over heart. Speech headline reading, "Every worker matters." The janitor stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then he slid it into his pocket and went back to scrubbing the stairwell. That night, exhaustion finally caught up to him. While cleaning the top floor corridor, he felt the world tilt. The bucket rolled away as he leaned against the wall, breathing heavy. The room didn't spin. Exactly, it folded inward, like his body had reached a quiet limit. A security guard found him minutes later sitting on the floor, hand pressed to his forehead. "You all right, man?" He nodded weakly. "Just dizzy. Skipped lunch maybe." "Want me to call someone?" He shook his head. No, just give me a second." They helped him to the break room. He sat there under the buzzing fluorescent light, sipping water from a paper cup, staring at the vending machine without focus. He thought about calling home, but what would he say? "Daddy's just tired again." Daddy fell asleep standing up. He stayed another hour to finish the job. The supervisor had texted earlier. "Need floors ready for morning tour." No one asked how he was feeling, only if the work was done. The next morning, he woke late for the first time in years. The alarm had gone off, but his body refused. His joints burned, his head throbbed. For a brief, dangerous second he's staying home. But then he saw the rent notice pinned by the door, and pulled himself up. When he reached the building, the receptionist barely looked up. "You're late," she said lightly, checking her watch. "Sorry," he murmured. "Traffic." No one questioned it further. No one ever did. During his lunch break, he sat by the back window watching rain streak down the glass. The city looked blurred, towers and people melting into a gray smear. He thought about his wife again. How she used to say, "You don't have to be strong all the time. Just be here." But being here had cost him everything else. He rubbed his temples, trying to clear the fog. At that moment, the CEO passed by with a few assistants, talking about expansion plans, investors, work culture. Their laughter filled the hallway. When they were gone, the janitor stood up slowly and returned to his cart. He caught a glimpse of his reflection on the polished floor, small, bent, invisible against the shine he'd created. That night he came home to find Mia asleep on the couch, the TV still on. A rerun of her school's play broadcast flickered across the screen, the same one he'd missed. She'd fallen asleep watching it, clutching her paper crown in her hand. He sat beside her quietly, lowering the volume. On the screen, her little voice echoed through the auditorium. "Every story has a hero, even if nobody sees them." He felt something in his chest tighten. The next morning he woke with a fever. His hands shook when he tried to pour coffee. The clock read 4:52 a.m. The shift started in 30 minutes. He stared at his reflection in the window. Pale, hollow-eyed. He should have called in sick, but he didn't. He showed up like always, moving slower than usual but refusing to stop. By noon, his manager noticed. "You look rough, man," she said. "Go home before you drop." "I'm fine," he muttered. But when he bent to pick up a rag, his body disagreed. The world went black for half a second, long enough for him to steady himself against the wall. By evening, word had spread through the staff that he'd nearly collapsed. Someone offered to cover his last few tasks, but he refused again. "If I don't finish, it'll just pile up tomorrow," he said. No one argued after that. When he finally left, the building lights behind him glowed warm and bright, a world that kept moving, unaware of the man who made it gleam. He walked home in drizzle, each step heavier than the last. By the time he reached his door, he didn't notice the small card taped there in a child's handwriting. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I still love you." He leaned against the frame, eyes closed, the sound of the rain filling the silence that had grown between them. He whispered, barely audible, "I love you too, kiddo." But the words stayed trapped in the doorway, half confession, half prayer, as exhaustion carried him inside. Tomorrow would come again. The work would wait. The silence too. It was well past midnight when the CEO returned to the office. The event had gone long. Too many handshakes. Too many photos, too many glasses raised to success. He needed quiet, a place to breathe away from applause. The top floors were always spotless, air sharp with polish and disinfectant. It comforted him, order, control, the illusion that everything was perfect. But as he walked toward his office, something felt off. The hum of machines echoed louder than usual, like the building itself was tired. Then, near the service corridor, he heard a dull clatter metal on tile. He frowned and turned the corner. There, half slumped against the wall, was the janitor. His mop bucket had tipped, water spreading across the floor. One hand was pressed to his chest, the other held a phone, still glowing faintly in the dim light. "Hey," the CEO's voice cracked sharper than he meant. He rushed over, kneeling beside the man. "Hey, can you hear me?" The janitor blinked, disoriented. His breath came shallow, his face pale. "I'm fine," he rasped. Just got lightheaded." "Fine? You're on the floor," the CEO said, setting his coffee aside. He loosened the man's collar, checked his pulse without quite knowing what he was doing. "You shouldn't even be here this late. When was your last break?" The janitor tried to smile, but it came out weak. "Had to finish the lobby. Cameras come in at 6. Needed it ready." "For God's sake, you could have collapsed alone," the CEO muttered, scanning for his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." The janitor's voice, though strained, carried sudden force. "Please don't. My kid's sleeping. If she hears something happened." The CEO hesitated. His instinct said to override him, but something in the man's eyes, raw, pleading, fatherly, made him stop. "All right," he said quietly. "No ambulance. But you're not staying here either." The janitor nodded faintly, relief mixing with fatigue. His phone slipped from his hand. The CEO picked it up to keep it safe, and froze when the screen lit up. It was a calendar reminder, a small simple note with a pink heart emoji beside it. Mia's play, 6:00 p.m. Don't be late. The CEO stared at it. The date was from 2 weeks ago. Missed. The phone background was a photo. The janitor and his daughter sitting on a park bench, paper crowns on their heads, laughing at something out of frame. For the first time, the CEO saw him not as a uniform, not as staff, but as a father, one who had spent his life showing up for everyone except himself. He looked back at the man slumped on the floor, chest rising slow, breath shallow. Without another word, he crouched down and said, "Come on, let's get you home." The cab ride was silent. The janitor sat hunched forward, clutching his coat. The CEO sat beside him, hands clasped, mind heavy. Outside, the city lights blurred past, towers of success seed on the backs of people like the one sitting inches away. When they reached the small apartment complex, the CEO insisted on walking him up. The janitor protested once, then gave up. The stairwell smelled faintly of detergent and rain. Inside the apartment, the CEO stopped. It was small, 2 rooms, a flickering lamp, a thin carpet worn at the edges, but it was full of color. Drawings covered the walls, stick figures, hearts, stars. In almost every one, a little girl had drawn herself and a taller figure in a janitor's uniform. Underneath many of them, the same words appeared in crayon: "Daddy the hero." The CEO's throat tightened. The janitor noticed him looking. "She draws those after school," he said, voice faint but proud. "Says I'm like the people in her storybooks, the ones who fix what's broken." He smiled faintly, then coughed. "Never had much to give her, but I wanted her to think her old man mattered to someone." The CEO looked around again. The small table stacked with unpaid bills and hand-drawn notes that said, "I love you, Dad." The chipped mug by the sink with a heart sticker half peep off. It wasn't luxury, but it was love visible in every corner. "She's lucky," the CEO said quietly. The janitor chuckled weakly. "Nah, I'm the lucky one. Kid still thinks the world of me, even after I keep missing it." He sank onto the couch, exhausted. The CEO hesitated, unsure if he should sit, unsure of what to say. He'd spent years giving speeches about leadership and empathy, but in this tiny apartment, none of those words felt big enough. "Finally," he said softly, "you shouldn't be working this hard." The janitor shrugged. "Work's all I know. Keeps the lights on, gives her a shot at something better. But it's killing you." "Maybe, but you'll never see me quit." There was no bitterness in the way he said it, just fact. The kind of quiet determination that doesn't shout or demand. The CEO looked down at his own hands, manicured, soft, untouched by labor, and felt something uncomfortable twist inside him. For years he'd told himself he respected his staff. He believed he paid them fairly, treated them decently, but now, sitting in a room built on sacrifice and love, he realized respect without understanding was just decoration. Clean on the outside, hollow within. The janitor leaned back, eyes fluttering. "Don't tell anyone you found me like that," he murmured. "They'll make a fuss." The CEO gave a small nod. "All right." As he stood to leave, his gaze caught one last drawing pinned by the door, a picture of the janitor standing beside a tall glass building. At the top, in the shaky handwriting of a child, it read, "Daddy works where dreams are made." He stepped closer, reading it twice. When he turned back, the janitor had already fallen asleep, head tilted, peace etched faintly into his tired face. The CEO whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe dreams are built by hands like his." He left quietly, locking the door behind him, the sound of rain following him down the stairwell. For the first time in years, he didn't call his driver. He walked home alone through the empty streets, the glow of the city blurring through the drizzle, each step echoing a thought he couldn't shake. How many people had he never truly seen? And for the first time in his life, that question hurt more than success ever healed. The next Monday morning, the janitor arrived at work an hour late, not by choice, but because his body simply refused to move faster. When he finally clocked in, he half expected a reprimand or a warning slip waiting on his locker door. Instead, there was a short note written in clean, deliberate handwriting. "Take it easy today. Doctor's appointment already covered by HR." He stared at the initials. The CEO, the same man who'd found him collapsed 2 nights ago. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his wallet beside his daughter's drawings, not knowing why, only that it felt important. Over the next few days, things felt different. Not publicly, no announcements, no sudden kindness from management, but in small, quiet ways. The CEO began showing up late in the evenings, long after the executives had gone home. At first, the janitor thought it was coincidence. Maybe the man was working late. But by the third night, when he found him leaning against the same hallway railing, holding 2 coffees, he realized it wasn't decaf, the CEO said, handing one over. You probably don't need more caffeine in your system. The janitor hesitated. You don't have to. I know, the CEO interrupted lightly. Humor me. They stood in silence for a while, sipping coffee, the hum of the vending machines filling the air. How's your daughter? The CEO asked finally. She's good, the janitor said. Still mad at me, I think, but she'll come around. The CEO nodded. Kids are resilient. Yeah, until they aren't. That line hung between them. The janitor didn't mean it as accusation, just truth. But the CEO looked down, turning the coffee cup slowly in his hands. I get that, he said quietly. Mine are grown now, barely talk to me anymore. Guess that's what happens when you mistake money for time. The janitor glanced at him, surprised by the honesty. You still got time to fix it. The CEO smiled faintly. Maybe, but I'm not sure I know how anymore. The janitor shrugged. You start by showing up. The rest figures itself out. Over the next few weeks, those short hallway exchanges became routine. The janitor would find him wandering through the building after hours, jacket off, tie loosened, a man looking less like a symbol and more like someone trying to remember who he was. Sometimes they talked about work, sometimes about their kids, sometimes they just stood quietly, listening to the building breathe. The janitor told him about his wife, how they'd met at a community theater where she played the lead, how she'd taught him to see beauty in small things. She used to say, even dust has a story if you let the light hit it right. The CEO chuckled softly. That's poetic. She was, the janitor replied, smiling. I'm just the cleanup crew. But there was pride in the way he said it. Pride the CEO hadn't noticed before. He learned about Mia's next play, too. A smaller performance, part of a community showcase. She's playing a tree this time, the janitor said, laughing. Says it's boring, but I told her even trees make the story work. She must take after her mother, the CEO said. She does, the janitor said quietly. And thank God for that. The CEO nodded, hiding the way his throat tightened. In return, he shared things he hadn't told anyone in years. How his son had stopped calling after college. How his daughter had moved abroad and only sent texts on birthdays. They think I cared more about the company than them, he admitted one night. And maybe they're right. The janitor didn't offer sympathy. He just said, then stop being the company for a while. It wasn't advice, it was permission. The kind the CEO hadn't realized he needed. One evening, they sat on a bench by the loading dock, eating vending machine sandwiches. The janitor was showing photos of Mia's artwork on his phone. Crude finger paintings and stick figures full of color. She drew this one after you dropped me home, he said, holding up the screen. Said Daddy got a ride from the king of the building. The CEO laughed. That's not the title I want to keep. Then change the story, the janitor said. You're the writer here. Something shifted in the CEO's expression. Not guilt, recognition. He looked around the dimly lit hallway, the scuffed floors, the faint smell of detergent, the quiet hum that lived behind every shiny corporate moment, and realized this was the part of the company he'd never had seen. Yes, the people who worked without applause, without notice, yet held the whole place together. The janitor didn't preach, he didn't demand. He simply existed with dignity, and somehow that said everything. By the end of that month, the CEO started small changes. New wellness policies for staff, a revised overtime rule, anonymous suggestion boxes for lower-level employees. The board called it employee engagement strategy. He knew better. It was a course correction. But outside of meetings and memos, he found himself coming back to those quiet talks, the ones that had stripped away the layers of success until only humanity remained. One night, as they parted ways, the CEO said, You know, I think I've learned more from our conversations than from half the books I've read. The janitor smiled faintly. Books tell you what to think. People show you how to feel. The CEO nodded slowly. You ever thought about teaching? The janitor laughed. Teach what? How to scrub a floor without streaks? Maybe how to stay human while doing it. The janitor's eyes softened. If I ever figure that out, I'll let you know. They both smiled. Not as boss and employee, not as rich and poor, but as two fathers trying to make sense of what they'd built and what they'd lost. And for the first time, neither felt alone in their struggle. When the CEO left that night, he paused by the glass doors, glancing back at the janitor still polishing the floor. For once he didn't see a man cleaning up after others. He saw a teacher, a mirror, a reminder that decency didn't come from titles, but from consistency. And deep down he knew something had changed. Not in policy, not in structure, but in the way one man looked at another. Respect had stopped being professional. It had become personal. The email came on a Wednesday morning, hidden between routine notices about maintenance schedules and safety drills. Subject: emergency cleanup. Saturday 6:00 p.m. shift assignment. The janitor read it twice, hoping he was mistaken. But there it was, written in sterile administrative precision. Due to an unexpected spill incident in the West Wing, additional janitorial coverage is required. Assigned Morales, Davis and H. Cole confirmed. He stared at his name, H. Cole, the letters feeling heavier than usual. Saturday 6:00 p.m. The same hour Mia's final performance would begin. His stomach sank. He immediately called his supervisor, a mid-level manager named Sloan, who had joined only months ago. She picked up, brisk and distracted. "Facilities," she said. "Ma'am, it's Henry," he said, voice calm but urgent. "I think there's a mistake on the cleanup roster. I've already submitted time off for Saturday. My daughter's event." "Yes, I saw that," Sloan cut in, "but we're short-handed. You're one of the only senior janitors cleared for chemical cleanup. It's mandatory." "I've never missed a shift," Henry replied softly, "but I can't miss this. It's her last play of the year. She sighed, already losing patience. "Mr. Cole, I understand. But if everyone starts picking family over duty, the building stops running. You'll be compensated, of course." He closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "With all respect, ma'am, this isn't about money." "Then consider it about responsibility," she said flatly, and hung up. For the first time in years, Henry didn't know what to do. He wasn't angry. He was afraid of being seen again as unreliable, as the kind of man who couldn't balance work and home. He tried reaching out to the CEO, but the message got intercepted by the assistant, Julia, efficient, polished, loyal to a fault. Her tone was professional, cold. "Sir, the CEO is in back-to-back meetings all week. I can make a note, but he doesn't handle scheduling directly. HR does. I just need 5 minutes, Henry said. He'd understand. Julia's reply came fast, rehearsed. "If I make an exception for you, I'd have to make one for everyone. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole." Sorry. The word people used when they wanted to sound kind while shutting a door. That night, Henry stayed late, cleaning the top floor, the same hallway where he and the CEO used to talk. But the office lights were off now. No coffee cups, no laughter, just silence. He felt the old ache returning, the familiar loneliness of someone who worked in the gaps between other people's lives. When he got home, Mia was sitting on the floor, cutting colored paper into shapes. "Hey," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Hey, big night coming up." She nodded. "It's the last one. Mrs. Allen said they might film it this time." He smiled. "That's great." Her scissors stopped. "You'll be there, right?" The question hit like a pulse. He hesitated too long for her not to notice. "Dad?" she pressed. He forced a breath. "I'll try my best, sweetheart. There's been a mix-up at work, but I'm trying to fix it." Her expression hardened. The quiet, serious look kids wear when they've learned too early what disappointment feels like. "You said that before. I know, but this time, don't," she said quietly. "Don't promise." He stood there, unsure what to say. She gathered her papers and went to her room. When her door clicked shut, the apartment fell back into silence. The next 2 days dragged. He worked double shifts, partly out of duty, partly out of guilt. Each night he passed by the CEO's office, but the man was either gone or buried in meetings. The door remained closed. On Friday afternoon, the CEO finally returned from a conference. Henry caught a glimpse of him entering the building, surrounded by assistants and reporters. He waited until the crowd thinned, then stepped forward. "Sir, could I speak with you for a moment?" Julia moved between them almost instantly. "Mr. Cole, not now, please. He's heading to a board call. It'll only take—" She lowered her voice. "I understand your situation, but this isn't the time." He glanced at the CEO close enough to see too far to reach. Their eyes met for half a second. The CEO gave a polite nod, unaware of what Henry was trying to say before disappearing into the elevator. The doors closed. Julia turned back. "You'll still get your overtime rate for Saturday." Henry exhaled slowly. "I don't want the pay." "Then you'll still get the experience," she said, and walked away. Saturday arrived heavy and gray. Rain streaked the windows as Henry laced his boots, the smell of detergent still clinging to his clothes. His reflection in the mirror looked older, smaller somehow, A man split between two loyalties. He stared at the clock. 5:12 p.m. Mia's place started in 48 minutes. He grabbed his phone, thumb hovering over the call button. Supervisor Sloan. But something inside him refused. He'd spent his whole life doing what he was told, waiting for permission to live. Not this time. He looked down at the note on the fridge, one of Mia's drawings, Daddy the hero. He smiled faintly, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. Back at the company, chaos was unfolding. The emergency cleanup turned out to be a minor maintenance issue, a leaky pipe contained hours earlier. The assignment had been a scheduling error that no one corrected because no one wanted to take responsibility. Julia noticed Henry's absence within the hour. She called his station, then his phone. No answer. When the CEO asked casually about the crew later that evening, Julia replied, all handled, except one no-show. He raised an eyebrow. Who? Henry Cole. The name hit like a soft echo. What happened? Unclear. I can issue a warning Monday. It's not the first time he's had conflicts with scheduling. The CEO frowned. Conflicts? She nodded, professional but slightly dismissive. He's a good worker, just emotional, always something personal. The CEO didn't respond. He excused himself mid-meeting, an odd tightness in his chest. Meanwhile, across town, Henry stood in the back of the small auditorium, breathless from running in the rain. The lights dimmed just as he slipped in. The stage glowed, cardboard trees, paper stars, children in painted costumes. And there she was, Mia. She spotted him almost instantly. Her eyes widened, her face breaking into a smile so pure it erased every ache in him. He didn't sit. He just stood there, dripping rainwater, gloves still in his pocket, watching her perform her lines with confidence and grace. Every applause felt like it belonged to both of them. When the play ended, she ran toward him, her crown slightly tilted, her cheeks glowing. You came. He knelt, breath-catching. I told you nothing's stopping me this time. She hugged him tight, burying her face in his neck. I don't care if you're late, she whispered. You're here. He smiled, holding her close, feeling years of guilt dissolve in that single moment. But outside, his phone buzzed again, messages from work, missed calls stacking up. He ignored them. For once he let the world wait. Later that night, after walking her home and tucking her into bed, he finally looked at the phone. 2 voicemails. One from Sloan, one from HR. Both short, clinical, and cold. Failure to report for assigned shift without approval constitutes abandonment. Expect review Monday. He sat in the kitchen, staring at the dark screen. He knew what that meant. But when he looked down the hall and saw his daughter sleeping peacefully, her paper crown still beside her pillow, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. For once he'd chosen right, even if it cost him everything else. He leaned back, whispering to the quiet apartment. Maybe some things are worth losing. And outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean, one unnoticed act at a time. The evening began like any other corporate goodwill appearance. Another sponsorship, another speech, another camera-ready act of charity. The CEO's assistant, Julia, had arranged everything perfectly. His company had funded the community center's renovation, which happened to include a small theater. Tonight's event was a youth showcase, local schools performing short plays, a feel-good, photo opportunity, nothing more. The CEO wasn't thrilled to spend his Saturday there, but he'd agreed. After the board's recent expansion talks, public relations mattered. He'd make a brief speech, smile for photos, and leave before the third act. He didn't know that this was her school. The auditorium was smaller than he expected. No velvet curtains, no grand lights, just paper decorations and nervous laughter echoing off the walls. Children darted backstage in painted costumes. Teachers whispered stage directions. Parents filled the seats, their pride louder than any orchestra. The CEO stood near the aisle, flanked by Julia and 2 local officials. She handed him the program. You're introducing the 3rd segment. After that, you can head out. He nodded, scanning the pages idly. Act 3, The Garden of Tomorrow. His eyes paused on the cast list. The second name read Mia Cole. He frowned, reading it again. Cole. Backstage, the janitorial staff had been asked to manage cleanup and prop shifts. One of the folding chairs bore a taped label, Maintenance, H. Cole. It was empty. Julia noticed it first and made a note on her clipboard. Typical, she muttered to a volunteer. He didn't even show. But when the CEO overheard, his attention sharpened. Did you say Cole? Yes, sir. That custodian from our main building. He was assigned to assist tonight. But he's a no-show. Again, the CEO's brow furrowed. He was supposed to be here. Assigned for coverage, she confirmed. He's probably home. HR will handle it Monday. Something uneasy twisted in the CEO's chest. He remembered the man's quiet eyes, the night he'd found him collapsed, the photo of that little girl with the paper crown. Without another word, he excused himself from Julia's side and walked toward the dimmed seats. The play began. A little boy narrated the story of a town that forgot how to plant flowers. Painted cardboard trees stood lopsided on the stage. A dozen children in bright green costumes entered, playing trees that could talk. The audience laughed softly, clapping as each line landed with the pure earnestness only children could carry. Then, from the second row, the CEO saw her, Mia. She looked exactly like the photo. Small face, wide eyes, paper crown slightly tilted. Her costume shimmered under the lights, a patchwork of green and gold foil. And in the far back, almost hidden behind the last row of chairs, stood a man, raincoat damp, work gloves stuffed into his pocket, eyes locked on the stage. Henry Cole. The CEO froze. He shouldn't have been there. He was supposed to be backstage, and yet the look on his face, tired, proud, almost trembling, made the CEO understand instantly. The man had chosen to be a Safan before being an employee. Something inside him shifted. On stage, the children were mid-scene when it happened, a small silence that swallowed the air. Mia had frozen. Her classmates turned to her, whispering her line under their breath, but she stood still, staring into the crowd. Her eyes darted nervously, scanning faces, until she found him, her father standing in the shadows near the exit, half hidden by the doorframe. He smiled softly and lifted his hand to his chest, tapping twice, the same gesture he used when helping her practice at home. It meant, breathe. You know this. Her lips trembled, but she took a deep breath. Even when the world forgets, she said finally, voice cracking, the roots remember. The crowd exhaled with her, clapping instinctively. Henry lowered his hand, tears welling. From his seat near the front, the CEO felt something rise in his throat, a mix of shame and awe. He watched as the little girl regained her rhythm, delivering her lines with renewed courage. The story turned from loss to renewal. The message simple yet piercing. Even forgotten things can grow again. The applause at the end was thunderous, far louder than the size of the room deserved. Parents cheered. Cameras flashed. The CEO didn't move. He just sat there, his hands still clasped. He turned slightly, watching Henry step forward to the side of the stage, clapping with quiet pride, his smile trembling as if afraid to believe this moment was real. The light caught his face, and for the first time, the audience noticed him. A man in janitor's clothes, standing straighter than anyone in the room. No one knew the story behind that moment. No one knew he'd left his job, risked his livelihood, defied orders, all for a few minutes of his daughter's world. But the CEO did, and it hit him with unbearable clarity. Every line he'd ever spoken about family values, every speech about balance and compassion, hollow. This man, this quiet custodian, had lived them more honestly than he ever had. When the curtain closed, the parents surged forward with flowers and congratulations. The CEO stood, hesitated, then slipped away from the crowd. He moved toward the back exit, toward the figure standing alone by the doors. Henry was gathering his coat, preparing to leave unnoticed. "Mr. Cole," the CEO called softly. Henry froze. When he turned, the instinct was defensive, half apology, half dread. "Sir, I can explain." "You don't have to," the CEO said, voice steady but kind. "You already did." Henry frowned, unsure. "I was in the audience," the CEO continued. "I saw your daughter. She was incredible." A flicker of pride crossed Henry's tired face. "She was brave," he said quietly. "I almost made her miss that play because of me." "You didn't," the CEO said. "You made her stronger." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the cleanup crew began behind them. Someone called for the maintenance team. Henry stiffened. The sound of his name always meant work. The CEO noticed. "Don't worry about that," he said. "You're off duty tonight." Henry gave a small, uncertain nod. "I'll make up the hours on Monday." "You won't need to." That line made Henry look up sharply. The CEO hesitated before speaking again. "You walked out of a shift tonight, didn't you?" Henry exhaled, the weight of the truth leaving his chest. "Yes, sir, I did. I know what that means." "It means," the CEO said slowly, "you made the right call." Henry blinked, confused. "Sir?" I gave the keynote tonight about family values, the CEO said almost bitterly. And then I watched a father prove what that actually looks like. I should be thanking you, not punishing you. Henry didn't respond. He wasn't used to kindness that sounded like accountability. The CEO extended his hand, not as a superior but as a man who finally understood the cost of empathy. Your daughter's play said something, didn't it? About roots remembering. Henry nodded faintly. Yeah. Even when the world forgets. Seems like she learned that from you. Henry looked down, embarrassed. I just do what I can. That's what makes it matter, the CEO said. They walked out together into the rain-softened night. The parking lot shimmered with puddles, the air cool and quiet. In the distance, laughter still echoed from the theater, the kind of joy that came from small triumphs. For once, neither man felt the need to fill the silence. As they reached the curb, the CEO stopped. You'll hear from HR Monday, he said finally. But not the way you expect. Henry frowned. Sir? Just trust me. He nodded slowly, uncertain but grateful. Before parting, the CEO glanced toward the window where Mia stood waving from inside, crown still shining under the lights. He smiled faintly. Tell her, she reminded a few adults what courage looks like tonight. Henry's eyes softened. She'll be proud to hear that. As the CEO walked toward his car, he felt the strange pull of humility, the kind that doesn't crush you but cleans you out. Behind him, the janitor stepped into the building's back corridor, soaked but lighter, carrying with him something money could never purchase. The look of his daughter's joy and the sound of her voice steadying when he believed in her. No one clapped for him. No spotlight followed. But somewhere inside that quiet, unnoticed moment, truth resurfaced, clean, unpolished, undeniable. And for the first time, both men, the one with power and the one with none, were on the same side of it. The applause had barely faded when the MC took the stage again, thanking the sponsors, the school board and the company that made the evening possible. The CEO was next on the program, expected to deliver his hizzle-polished remarks about community partnerships and future growth. He didn't want to speak. Not yet. Not after what he'd just witnessed. He sat there in the front row, still staring at the stage where the children had just taken their final bow. The lights had dimmed, but in his mind the moment replayed again and again. The little girl trembling, finding her father's face in the crowd, then finding her courage. That look of trust, of pure belief, had cut through years of noise in his life. He could still feel it, when the MC turned toward him with a polite nod. And now a few words from our guest of honor, CEO Richard Keller. The audience began to applaud again. He stood slowly, smoothing his jacket. His heart thudded heavier than usual. He wasn't nervous, not in the way people are before speaking, but in the way a man feels when he knows he can't hide behind practiced words anymore. As he reached the podium, the lights brightened slightly. Cameras pointed up. A few board members smiled expectantly. Julia, his assistant, watched from the side, clipboard in hand, ready for the standard speech she had prepared. He looked down at the paper, his own words, and folded it shut. Good evening, he began. The microphone caught the roughness in his voice, surprising even him. I was supposed to come here tonight to talk about leadership, about how companies like ours invest in the next generation. He paused, glancing briefly toward the back of the room where Henry Cole stood half in shadow. But tonight I realized I've been getting that word wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He took a steady breath. Leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest. It isn't about titles, or wealth, or the number of people who work under you. It's about the people who keep showing up, even when no one notices, the ones who hold everything together quietly, until one day we realize we've been standing on their shoulders. A stillness fell over the audience. The line wasn't rehearsed, but it felt like truth. He glanced down again, his eyes softening. There's someone in this room tonight who reminded me what that really means. Julia shifted uncomfortably, sensing this was not the planned speech. The CEO continued, voice deepening with emotion. 2 weeks ago, one of our employees, a man many of you probably pass by every day without realizing, taught me more about integrity than any book, seminar, or board meeting ever could. Henry's head dropped slightly, realizing where this was going. This man, the CEO said, works nights. He doesn't have a corner office. He doesn't get mentioned in newsletters or company awards. But when I saw him tonight, standing in the back of this room, watching his daughter on that stage, I understood something I had forgotten a long time ago. The room was utterly silent. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. I saw a father who chose love over fear, a man who risked his job, his reputation, his security, just to keep a promise to his little girl. And I realized. He exhaled slowly, eyes glistening under the light. I realized that's what real leadership looks like. A few people in the crowd exchanged glances. Others leaned forward, listening. He looked toward Henry again, his voice steady but thick with feeling. "Mr. Cole, would you please stand?" Henry froze. "Sir, please," the CEO said gently. Reluctantly, Henry stepped forward from the shadows. Every head turned. Parents, students, teachers, all looking at the man they hadn't noticed before. The CEO gestured toward him. "This is Henry Cole, one of our janitors. And tonight he reminded all of us, especially me, that there is no small job when it's done with heart." Applause began, hesitant at first, then growing. The CEO continued over the sound. "While people like me stand on stages and talk about values, he lives them, every single day. Quietly, consistently, with humility that puts the rest of us to shame." Julia's clipboard slipped slightly in her hands. She'd never seen him speak this way. He took a breath, the kind you take when you're about to cross a line you can't go back from. "I also found out that due to an oversight in our company, Mr. Cole was reassigned to work tonight, during his daughter's final play. He chose to come here instead, and I want everyone to know." He paused, locking eyes with Henry. That was the best decision he ever made. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd again. Shock, confusion, admiration all blending together. The CEO looked out at them, his tone shifting from soft to firm. "I've spent years chasing perfection in numbers, in presentations, in profit margins. But I forgot the one kind of perfection that actually matters. Showing up for the people who matter most." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "You know what's on my lock screen? A stock photo of my company's headquarters. That used to mean something to me. But after tonight," he looked over at Mia, who was peeking from behind the curtain, eyes wide. "After tonight, I think I'll change it to something real, something that reminds me what pride should actually look like." He pointed gently toward her, like that little girl smiling because her father kept his word. The audience turned. She blushed and ducked behind the curtain, giggling softly as the crowd began to applaud again, this time with feeling. The CEO smiled faintly, then faced the audience once more. "Henry Cole is the kind of father, the kind of man every leader should aspire to be. And as of tonight, I want to make something clear. He's not losing his job. He's getting it back with full benefits, a flexible schedule, and paid time to attend every event that matters to his daughter." Gasps broke out, then applause, then cheering. Henry stood frozen, eyes wide. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You already said it," the CEO replied. "You said it by being here." The crowd's clapping swelled louder. Teachers, students, even other employees who had once barely noticed him. Some stood, some cried. The janitor's hands trembled slightly as he looked toward his daughter. She ran forward, unable to stop herself, and hugged him tightly. The applause grew even louder, echoing through the small auditorium like thunder. The CEO's voice softened. "I've built buildings, companies, teams, but I think this moment might be the first thing I've ever helped build that actually means something." He stepped away from the podium. His words now for Henry alone. "You once told me you keep showing up because it's all you know how to do. But maybe that's what heroism is. Showing up even when it's hard, even when nobody sees it." Henry blinked, fighting tears. "I just wanted her to know she comes first. And now she does," the CEO said gently. "And so do you." The audience rose to their feet again, applause breaking into whistles and cheers. The CEO didn't raise his hands to quiet them. He just let the sound wash over both of them, a kind of collective redemption Remember man had expected. For a brief second the roles reversed completely. The janitor stood in the light, and the CEO stood beside him, not above him, not in command, but as a man learning how to be human again. When the applause finally softened, the CEO leaned toward the microphone one last time. "To the parents, to the staff, to the kids out there, let's try to remember what we saw tonight. That success isn't about being in charge, it's about showing up with heart. And the person who taught me that isn't on a magazine cover. He's the man who made sure our floors were clean before any of us walked in." He turned to Henry. "Thank you, Mr. Cole, for cleaning up more than floors tonight." The audience laughed softly, emotional. Henry, embarrassed but smiling, finally found his voice. "Guess I just did what I'm good at, sir." The CEO laughed too, a real laugh, not the practiced kind. "We could all learn to be as good at that as you are." He looked out across the sea of faces, executives, parents, employees, and saw something different in their eyes. Not admiration for him, but recognition for someone they'd ignored. And for the first time in his career, that didn't sting. It felt right. After the ceremony ended, people swarmed Henry with handshakes and kind words. A few teachers took photos of him with his daughter. Parents patted his shoulder. For once, no one looked past him. The CEO stayed behind, away from the cameras, watching quietly. When the crowd thinned, he approached again, carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate from the concession stand. "Thought you might prefer this to champagne," he said. Henry chuckled softly. "Definitely my speed." They stood side by side again, the same way they had in the hallways weeks earlier. The CEO sipped his drink. "You know, I think this might be the best thing I've ever said in public." Henry grinned. "Because it was the first thing you actually meant." That line made the CEO laugh again, shaking his head. "Fair enough." They watched Mia run across the stage, laughing with her friends, her crown slipping off. She turned back toward them, waving. Henry waved back, his smile unguarded now. Proud, free, alive. The CEO followed his gaze. "You know," he said, "I think I might call my son tomorrow." Henry looked at him. "You should." "I will," the CEO said quietly. "Thanks to you." Henry tilted his head. "You helped too, sir. Just by seeing." The CEO nodded, the truth of that simple sentence sinking deep. And as they stood there, 2 men from opposite worlds, both humbled, both changed. The lights of the small stage glowed around them. The night didn't end with contracts or promotions, but with something rarer: dignity restored, connection renewed. For Henry, the humiliation that once defined him had become a badge of honor. For the CEO, redemption no longer sounded like applause. It sounded like silence filled with meaning. Monday morning came bright and strange. Not heavy, not anxious, just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels new, as if the world has shifted by half a degree and you're the only one who notices. Henry Cole stood outside the company's main building, holding the same ID badge he'd carried for 12 years. It felt different in his hand now, not as a symbol of permission, but as proof of what endurance could. When he walked inside, the receptionist looked up, surprised. "Mr. Cole, you're back?" He nodded, smiling gently. "Looks like it." A few of his coworkers waved from down the hall, whispering things he didn't quite catch. Not gossip this time, respect. Then Julia, the CEO's assistant, appeared by the elevator. Gone was her clipped tone and practiced detachment. She looked genuinely uneasy. "Mr. Keller wants to see you in his office." Henry gave a slow nod. Of course. The top floor had always felt like another world: quiet carpets, sunlight spilling across glass tables, air that smelled like polish instead of sweat. When Henry entered, the CEO rose from behind his desk. No suits today. Just rolled up sleeves, open collar, tired eyes that looked human. "Morning, Henry," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "Have a seat." Henry hesitated, then sat carefully, his posture humble but steady. "I wanted to talk to you before HR does," the CEO began. "Technically, you broke policy. You left a scheduled shift without clearance." "I know," Henry said. "And I'll take whatever comes with it." The CEO nodded slowly. "You already did." Henry frowned slightly. The CEO continued. "You paid your price the moment you chose your daughter over your job. And the moment I saw that, I realized the policy was what needed fixing, not you." Henry looked up, uncertain. The CEO leaned back. "Starting next month, we're launching something new. A family outreach program. Paid time for employees to attend family events. Flexible scheduling for parents. Even mentorship sessions for workers who want to move up. It's called the Cole Initiative." Henry's breath caught. "Sir, that's because of you," the CEO interrupted softly. "Because one night, I watched a man do what most of us forget: to put love before labor. You didn't just change my mind, Henry. You changed this company." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Henry found his voice. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the CEO replied. "Just promise me one thing: keep showing up for her. Not here, not in meetings or shifts. For her. That's a real job." Henry smiled faintly. "That's the only one I've ever wanted." A week later, his schedule officially changed. 4-day rotation, evenings free, weekends reserved for family. He didn't ask for it. The CEO insisted. And for the first time, Henry didn't walk home half dead from exhaustion. He walked home alive, stopping by the bakery to pick up cupcakes for Mia. When he reached the apartment, she was waiting by the window. She ran to the door as soon as she saw him. "Daddy." He lifted her into his arms. "Guess what?" "What?" she asked, eyes bright. "I'm going to be home more." She tilted her head. "You mean you quit?" He laughed. "No, sweetheart. I just got better hours. My boss, he finally figured out I work best when I get to see you." She grinned, her missing tooth making the smile even wider. "Does that mean you can come to my art show next week?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, small changes had begun to ripple outward. He'd replaced the framed awards on his wall with photographs, one of his children, one of the staff gathered at a new employee picnic, and one of Henry and Mia taken at the end of the play, the pair of them beaming under the stage lights. The next company newsletter went out with an unusual headline: "Every job matters. Every family counts." Beneath it, a story not about profit or partnerships, but about humility, second chances, and the power of one man's quiet example. The board thought it was sentimental. The employees thought it was about time. And the CEO didn't care what anyone thought, not anymore. 2 months later, spring returned. At the local community center, another event filled the small auditorium, the annual student art showcase. Tables lined the hall, covered in drawings, crafts, and painted clay figures. Parents milled about, chatting, proud and relaxed. Mia stood beside her display, tugging at her dad's sleeve. "You have to see this one." He bent down to look. A painting of a janitor sweeping under a sky of stars, each star labeled with a word: kind, brave, strong, mine. He blinked hard, his voice catching. "This one's my favorite." From behind them a familiar voice said, "Mine too." Henry turned. The CEO stood there in casual clothes, holding a cup of coffee and an awkward smile. "I couldn't resist the invitation," he said, nodding at Mia. "She sent me a handwritten one through our HR department." Mia grinned proudly. "You're his boss, right?" "I am," the CEO said, crouching slightly to her level. "But your dad's the real teacher around here." She giggled. "He teaches cleaning." "Better," the CEO replied. "He teaches what it means to care." Henry laughed softly, shaking his head. "Careful, sir, you'll ruin your reputation." "I think I already did," the CEO said with a small smirk. "And I'm better for it." The three of them stood together for a moment, watching as other parents passed by, admiring the artwork. One mother whispered, "That's the man from the story, the janitor the CEO talked about." Henry shifted, embarrassed. "Didn't think people would remember." "They will," the CEO said, "because they saw something real for once." Later, as the program began, Mia walked onto the small stage again, this time with confidence, her voice clear as she introduced the next section. "My dad says heroes don't always wear capes," she said into the microphone. "Sometimes they just wear gloves and show up anyway." The crowd laughed softly, touched. Henry felt his chest tighten again, the same way it had the night of the play. He glanced at the CEO, who was already looking at him, both men smiling, both quietly grateful for the strange twist of fate that had brought them here. Afterward, when the crowd thinned, the CEO lingered by the doorway. "You know," he said, "I used to think leadership was about being followed, but I think it's more about learning when to follow someone else's example." Henry nodded. "Sometimes the hardest part of leading is remembering you're still human."
The CEO chuckled.
"You sound like someone who should be on our advisory board." Henry laughed. "I'm good right where I am, sir. Floors I can handle. People I'm still figuring out." The CEO smiled, extending a hand. "Then we'll keep figuring it out together." Henry shook it firmly. "Deal." As they stood by the door, watching Mia chase her friends across the hall, a familiar peace settled between them. Not the uneasy silence of hierarchy, but the quiet understanding of two men who'd earned each other's respect. When they parted ways that evening, Henry looked up at the night sky, the same stars Mia had painted, now real and bright above the city. He thought about everything that had changed, and how little of it had started with speeches or plans. It had started with a broken promise, a small act of defiance, and a father's decision to keep his word no matter the cost. He smiled to himself. Sometimes healing doesn't look like triumph. It looks like coming home on time. And inside the community hall, as the lights dimmed and laughter faded, one drawing still hung above all the others, a small picture of a man sweeping under a sky full of stars. The caption read, "My dad, the one who showed up." 6 months later, the company's lobby looked a little different. Where there used to be framed charts of quarterly growth, there was now a wall lined with photographs, moments instead of metrics, families, birthdays, volunteer days. At the very center hung a single image that stopped visitors every time they passed. A father and daughter, mid-laugh, faces lit by stage lights. Beneath it a small plaque read, "The Power of Presence," dedicated to Henry and Mia Cole. Employees whispered the story to newcomers. How the janitor who once swept the floors became the reason the company redefined success. How a CEO changed by humility began to measure productivity not by hours worked, but by lives balanced. Every morning, Henry passed that wall quietly on his way to the supply room. He never boasted about it. He'd just glance at the photo, nod once, and smile. To him it wasn't a monument, it was a reminder. A reminder that showing up had always been enough. One evening near the end of the year, the same community theater hosted another school performance. The seats filled with parents and teachers again. Laughter, whispers, the familiar hum of anticipation. In the back row, a man in a simple sweater slipped in quietly, unnoticed. Richard Keller, no longer the restless executive chasing applause, but a man who'd learned how to listen. He sat in the same seat where Henry once stood months before, his hands clasped loosely, a small smile resting on his face. The curtain rose. Mia stepped onto the stage, taller now, more confident. She spotted her father sitting near the front and waved midline, earning a laugh from the audience. Henry waved back, grinning. The proud father once invisible now seen by all. Richard watched the exchange and felt a warmth he hadn't felt in years, something close to peace. When the applause came, it wasn't just for the children. It was for every parent who had learned that being there was the greatest success of all. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Henry found the CEO waiting near the exit. "Didn't think you'd make it," Henry said with a teasing smile. Richard shrugged. Didn't want to miss the sequel. They both laughed softly. Then the CEO looked toward the stage one last time. "Funny," he said. "You used to clean these floors. Now they name programs after you." Henry smiled. "I didn't change that much, sir. I just stopped apologizing for who I was." Richard nodded slowly. "Maybe that's the lesson. Success isn't about rising higher. It's about standing honest." They shook hands quietly, like friends who didn't need words anymore. And as the lights dimmed, a narrator's voice lingered. Gentle, reflective. Some stories aren't about power or pride. They're about presence. The quiet kind that builds legacies out of love. Because real success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by who looks up and smiles when you finally show up. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you're watching from, and one word that describes how this story made you feel.